Arcane stands as a high watermark achievement for the medium of animation. The formal construction of this show has few, if any, peers when it comes to its style and composition. Entering the second season's final 2 acts, I was certain Arcane would find itself on the mantle of greatest shows ever made. Unfortunately, the finely tuned, interlaced story threads that made Season 1 such a profoundly meaningful experience unwind into a bombastic mess of a finale. Arcane's first season wasn't flawless, but it did a fantastic job at focusing its scope through setting. On a scene-by-scene basis, I don't see a drop in quality for Season 2, but its broad strokes paint an out-of-focus picture. Characters develop too quickly, the setting feels hollow, while the Piltover-Zon conflict that served as the emotional centerpiece of the story gets sidelined. Arcane's ending left me disappointed, but that doesn't mean the show never rekindles the greatness of what came before. Arcane plays out almost like a Shakespearean tragedy, as the story leans into its theatrical influences, beautifully shown through the new opening. When watching the second season, you feel like the characters race on a collision course of suffering, even in the lighter moments. Just like in Season 1, the creators do a masterful job at balancing this larger ensemble while giving each character their own distinct arc, not to mention the action of the story that matches the highest of any show you'll ever watch. With a production that's on top of its game and an already established cast of brilliant characters, where did Season 2 go wrong? Time will receive most of the criticism, and rightfully so. You can't help but wonder what an extra season or even a couple more episodes would have done for Arcane. Wishing Arcane didn't end so quickly is a really valid criticism, but I think the story could have delivered in the 2-season time frame with one simple adjustment. Silco. I don't mean that Silco should have survived the first season, but that Ambessa and Viktor don't fill his shoes in any meaningful way. Silco was a top-tier villain, written with complex motivations, an empathetic goal, and focused the story. His surprising relationship with Jinx was arguably the most intriguing dynamic in Season 1.
Seeing them that day.
More importantly, though, than being a well-written character, was his influence on the Piltover-Zon conflict. The strife between Upper and Lower City, Piltover and Zon, served as the foundation for everything in Arcane, and Silco always brought the plotline back to that foundation.
All together, Marcus.
In the first season, Piltover and Zon become characters of their own, a setting taken form. By nature, leaning into the downfall and destruction of both in the second season removes the textures of the cities that shaped the characters. With Silco and so much of the Council gone, Season 2 needed someone to step up and become a driving force for the struggle. Jinx and Caitlyn happily obliged. The first part of Season 2 has all of the same flavors and drama we love from Season 1. Political strife continues into a downward spiral after Jinx attacked the Council. Jinx becomes a symbol for Zon, while Caitlyn, Mel, and Vi all try to navigate how they can rectify things in Piltover to avoid a slaughter of the Lower City. Characters like Jace, Viktor, and Echo are a bit sidelined here, but we get enough cool moments, especially with Viktor and Jace, that we never really mind. Piltover and Zon tie all plot lines together, while Jinx and Vi's relationship hold the keys to unlocking the story's greatest emotion. Season 2 doesn't miss a beat as Vi joins the Enforcers and searches for her estranged sister. The tragedies of Arcane live in the impossible situations characters find themselves in. Caitlyn seeks revenge for her mother and Piltover elites, and removing Jinx would be the best way to quell shouts of war from her comrades. Vi says she'll help, but when she has a chance to remove her sister, she hesitates. But Caitlyn doesn't. Circumstances like this grow from the oppression Piltover commits to Zon. Everything that Silco represented from the first season takes life in this battle between Caitlyn and Jinx. After such a long history of oppression towards Zaun and the recent violence Jinx has committed against Piltover, Caitlyn and Jinx are destined to stand tall as pillars of war representing both cities, and I couldn't wait to see how the final 2 acts would resolve this. Then, the narrative repudiates Jinx and Caitlyn as catalysts, and replaces them with Ambessa and Viktor as generic villains. When you watch the latter half of this season, you get the feeling that choices are forced onto characters rather than them developing organically, mainly through the dumbing down of Jinx and Caitlyn, as writers wanted to make sure both are viewed as heroes in the end. So they quickly get agency taken away from them to let characters with no stakes in the 2 cities' conflict rage alongside newly minted Jesus. Ambessa represents my issues with Season 2. From a design and presence standpoint, her character's fantastic. A badass warmonger that can physically take on any character in the show. A ruthless character who manipulates her way to the top. On paper, there's nothing not to like. But the more influence Ambessa gains, the further she removes nuance from the story. Here's what I mean. One of the coolest arcs in the first season was watching Mel navigate her way through the politics of Piltover and Zaun as an outsider who had come to deeply love and be part of this city. The introduction of her strong badass mother rips Mel's screen time away from that conflict to her nebulous homeland that has nothing to do with the rest of the show. Silco represented all of the most important conflict in Arcane, while Ambessa has no interest in the outcome of that struggle. For as intimidating and awesome of a design that she has, her disconnect from the most fundamental aspects of the story are too much to overcome. Ambessa spews theory on leadership and power throughout the season, but you never shake the feeling that this character should be the villain of a different story. Ambessa's lack of care for the most important element of this show makes her a blunt tool that only forces our characters to band together, and Viktor goes right over the top of her. Viktor is my favorite character in Arcane. His story arc in Season 1 had all of the right flavors, and in Season 2 he scratches a philosophical itch that I love. His character goes awry in the timing of his ascension. By the time we learn about the people he saved, Jace and Ambessa raid and destroy the camp. Viktor's new powers raise a lot of intriguing questions, and none get explored once he tries to enact the third impact. Viktor is deeply connected to the people of these cities, but all of his actions cause a removal of them. So much of Season 2 takes place in a cult camp that feels out of time, or the spiritual realm that exists between worlds. These settings are beautiful and haunting, but they subconsciously sully the realism of oppression the people of Zaun have gone through. The story sets up plots of revolution, then drops them and never looks back. By leaning into a villain with no ties to the cities and a god character, the villains of the story undercut the most important part of the show, and in return make the setting feel like a shell of itself. In Season 1, we see a cast of people who all try to forge a better life for themselves or the people around them. In Season 2, we follow a warmonger and a god. The erosion of setting is nothing new in large-scale stories like this. As situations grow more dire, setting tends to fall apart with apocalypse on the horizon. In the same way magic overtakes the story, mystical realms replace physical ones. The magic in the final episodes, while beautiful and world-threatening, doesn't interact with the setting in the same well-thought-out way as Season 1. I think this abandoning of Piltover and Zaun's greater population in Season 2 hurts worse because of the role it played in the story up until this point. Series defined by their setting, like Arcane, always stay at their best when they revel in that setting. Here my mind goes to the mainline Dune books that, despite spanning a millennia, always keep its focus on the desert of Arrakis, never diluting the setting for mysticism. This lack of focus on the city's struggles worms its way into each character. The majority of the season, Mel is sidelined into a magical prison with implications that barely matter. Jace, Echo, and Heimerdinger excel in a B-plot that gives us a memorable but ultimately disconnected climax, and Vi's character gets nothing of substance to work with. It feels like Season 2 can't escape what a wonderful job Season 1 did. A story always looking back to the amazing things it did in the past and never fully embracing the now. That is how I feel with the prolonged life of Vander as the Beast. Maybe Arcane's greatest accomplishment was the death of Vander and the creation of Jinx. Season 2 then does such a great job at unraveling Jinx back into powder with Isha. Arcane is Jinx, and Jinx Arcane. Her tragedy was masterfully executed in Season 1. And her relationship with Isha in Season 2 adds more personality to her character, a minted icon of revolution that finds her humanity by filling the role she herself lost growing up. Isha pushes Jinx to be a better person and to face the realities of what she did. Then Vander comes back as the final, unnecessary push to get Jinx to seek out Vi. The return of Vander undercuts Isha's relationship with Jinx, and the double suicide with Isha and finally Jinx, who's probably still alive, rings hollow as a message. I don't see the point for Isha to sacrifice themselves, and Jinx's depression, leading her to make a similar sacrifice, feels like a betrayal to the audience. Vander's role as the Beast being another example of how the story removes nuance for the sake of moving the plot along. Using a character to force others to band together is the only solution the writers come up with for the complex drama they set up. Need Vi and Jinx to make up? Bring back their father as a beast monster. Need Piltover and Zaun to work together? Make Viktor an all-powerful freedom sucker. Redeem Caitlyn? Make Mbessa the most important villain who manipulated her the entire time. The show undercuts its characters left and right by introducing elements to force inorganic change. I think that is what leads to characters jumping around in their development, the worst offender being Vi. Vi becomes an enforcer at the end of the first episode, a major decision that she reverses after Caitlyn tries to kill Jinx. Then she goes emo, then back to loving her sister. From episode to episode, Vi changes, but we never explore the why. This leads us back to the discussion on time. Maybe Vi's changes would have felt more organic with 12 more episodes, but I think the real issue here is that the villains of the second season weren't directly tied into the conflict that changes our characters, and instead are side players with their own agendas outside of the interwoven setting. Piltover and Zaun presuppose everything that should happen in the story. Vi becoming an enforcer is a massive deal because it's her leaving Zaun and joining Piltover, but it gets swept under the rug for no reason. Sevika joining Piltover's council at the story's end should come as a major resolve to the conflict, but instead it's just an aside. The show sets up amazing drama, then sidesteps it, hoping a big battle with Mbessa and Viktor will satisfy the audience. Maybe all of this is a bit too harsh. Arcane Season 2 is a far cry from bad, but I find myself digging into the cracks of this story because it did have a realistic chance to be a widely accepted masterpiece of a show. And there is a lot of good here. I love how Arcane uses montage as its cinematic language. Characters, ideas, and moments all connect through montage, giving Arcane's story unmatched momentum. Montage was the perfect tool for the creators to highlight each character while relying on the visuals to do the lion's share of the work. Despite me not loving Beast Vander, there's no denying the emotional impact of the moment where he hugs Vi and Jinx again. Every episode is littered with these kind of scenes, the ones that give you the feeling you've never watched anything this cool. Like I said earlier, on a scene-by-scene basis, the story never lets up. Philosophical declarations, heart-pounding action, vivid imagery, all makes you wanna stand and cheer. But it's when you think about the larger story that Arcane's ending fails. Episode 7 is worth mentioning. In this alternate reality, Echo and Heimerdinger are sent to a utopian setting where Hextech doesn't exist. This is contrasted with Jace seeing the dystopian future of what will happen if Viktor succeeds. This emotional what-if brings Echo and Jace's character to the forefront while hitting home just how poorly things have gone and will continue to go. Echo's character gets shafted in both seasons, so I'm thankful for how much they give him here. In this alternate reality, it's clear that he and Powder have acted on feelings for each other, but we spend enough time with them that Echo gets to redevelop those feelings with her. It is an episode that has all of the emotion and love for the characters that gives the climax much needed emotional weight. Echo goes from underdeveloped to getting maybe the best conclusion of any character. It's really a slam dunk of an episode that I can't shake the feeling could have been approached differently. For all of the good this does for Echo, Jace, and Heimerdinger, for the third and final episode of Arcane, it doesn't connect to the rest of the cast nearly enough to justify taking up that much screen time. Don't get me wrong, I love episode 7, but I think its removal from everything else shows how disconnected all of the plots and developments are in this season. So much so that it forces Viktor to become a third-level impact threat just to make the final battle make any sense at all. When reflecting on the end of Arcane, my mind returned time and again to Silco. Silco was the ideal villain for a show of this scope. He matches the nuance of the rest of the cast without overshadowing them, and did just enough to make sure this group of legends never got too far away from each other. The holes of Season 1 were easy to look past when focus would be pulled back to the most important drama. So much of Ambessa and Viktor turn our focus to less compelling drama for the sake of forced character change. And I think it's a real shame, because a lot of what Arcane gives us is some of the best animated storytelling I've come across. Arcane is a good show with some great moments and characters, but it missed out on the chance to be the greatest show I have ever seen by leaving behind the parts of its story that made us fall in love with it in the first place. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to support the channel, then consider checking out my Patreon or YouTube membership. There you get access to this channel's Discord server, exclusive posts, and your name at the end of every video. Thank you again for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.